Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I am so glad that you decided to join us today. We are talking politics with me, Dr. Brian Baker, and I want to get into a development that is taking place when we think about all the issues in the South when it comes to these gerrymanders, redistricting conversations taking place where there are a lot of Republican-led legislatures that are trying to essentially erase black voting power in the South, where you take Tennessee and Memphis in particular, where they're splitting up the city into three different districts and trying to essentially say like, well, that's being fair. Well, I don't know why you would need to split up any city into three different districts, especially when it's one of the main reasons people would come to Tennessee. When you think about Tennessee, you look at Memphis, you look at Nashville, you're not thinking about going to certain places in rural communities in Tennessee, if we're to be honest about that. And that's happening across the South, where these legislatures are trying to erase black voting power and they know that more than 55% of people who identify as black live in the South. And that's according to, when you go to the Pew Research Center, you can find that facts about the U.S. black population. So if you're looking for that, just type that in, facts about the U.S. black population. You can find that they have on their fact sheet from January 23rd of 2025. So as we are looking at some things, I think it's important for us to understand what the numbers look like, to understand what the strategy is from opposing teams, if you want to look at it that way, or opposing groups who want to essentially really silence the voting power of constituents, because that's really what it comes down to. So how do you respond to that? What is the response that we should have? Because as I've talked about in the first couple of episodes, we really got to think about strategy. We know what some folks are trying to do right now. So if we got to make sure that we're being completely honest about this. Right now, there is a Republican in the White House. The U.S. House of Representatives is led by Republicans, and you also have the U.S. Senate that's led by Republicans. We know the type of legislation that they have put out, which isn't much. That's the truth. I'm not trying to be difficult or to be disrespectful. I'm just being honest. It's like, well, I'm trying to think of some type of legislation that I think really impacts and makes a difference for the American people. And I'm having a hard time outside of what they call the big, beautiful bill, which did do some things for tax cuts for the wealthy, but I don't know how that has helped us out. I'm still struggling to see how having a war conflict going on in Iran is helping anything, because since that has happened, gas prices have increased dramatically across the country. At the same time, we have seen the price of groceries and the cost of living continue to increase. So I'm just having a hard time trying to see any policies that have come out from the White House or any policies that have come through Congress that have been impactful in a meaningful way for all of us as Americans here in the country. Now, the reason why I bring that up is because that's why you're seeing such a big push after the U.S. Supreme Court's decision of essentially gutting Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, why they have now said in the Calais decision, by the way, if you want to look that up. So now you have these southern states that have rushed to try to do some redistricting. So any of these southern states that have either a majority or a supermajority Republican-led legislature in those states, they have made a huge push. Tennessee is one, Alabama is another, and you have Louisiana as another, and even Florida with Governor Ron DeSantis trying to do some redistricting to try to essentially insulate the Republican Party now that they have all of these bad policies that are actually being implemented, and we're seeing it in real time. And they know, and this is the thing, they know that these policies are not popular. They're just not. If you look at polls out there, there is a lot of unpopularity that is swirling around, and it is a large possibility, high probability, that the Republicans are going to lose control of the House at a minimum, and they may lose control of the Senate. And so what this redistricting effort is to try to essentially make it more difficult for Democrats to win or independents to win seats in the midterm elections in November. And if the Republicans can hold on to a majority in the House and or the Senate, they would like to have both, then they can continue with business as usual. If Democrats win back the House and or the Senate, that's going to change a lot of things, because then the U.S. Congress will actually do, I believe, more of what they're supposed to be doing right now, which is to be a check on the executive branch. But that hasn't happened very often, if we're to be honest about it. Okay. So what do we do in this moment? And the NAACP, they are now urging athletes to, and fans and alums, whoever you want to associate with that, to boycott a lot of these SEC schools, these Southern schools. But I will say the Southeastern Conference and the ACC, Atlantic Coast Conference, are two in particular. Now, I am an SEC guy. I graduated from the University of Florida. I graduated from Vanderbilt University. I grew up watching the Florida Gators. I have been a huge Florida Gators football fan for more than 3 decades. So this is something that is also personal to me, because I've always wanted the school to do well, and I've always wanted the school to win championships whenever possible. And this is the deal. More than half of the people who identify as Black or African American live in the South, more than 55%, according to the Pew Research Center. So if you want to go to the Pew Research Center website and look at facts about the U.S. Black population, and when you look at the fact sheet, it's on January 23rd, 2025, talks about how the Black population is not only growing, and right now in 2023 was estimated to be around 48.3 million people who self-identified as Black, and making up about 14.4% of the country's population. This is a significant increase from 2000 that they talk about, and that's one of the things that I think that Republicans are looking at as well, where they say, there's a shift. There's more people who are non-white that are now living in this region, and they have a voting base. And we know since about 1965, a majority, most Black people do vote Democratic. They don't vote Republican. And that's probably not going to change anytime soon, based on a lot of the policies that have been coming out recently. And so that's not going to change. So what is the strategy on their end, which is to try to say, okay, how can we erase some of that Black voting power, or at the very least, how do we mitigate the damage by trying to redistrict and get things to where we have more of a chance to win. Now, I talked about this in our last episode. You can't gerrymander free will. You can't gerrymander free will. You can't make people want to vote for you. And if you have poor policies or policies that are hurting people, you're definitely not going to get people to vote for you. So we'll see how that all shakes out in November. But the NAACP, what they're saying is this: you know what, parents, fans, we need to make sure that our kids are going to a different place. There's no reason for them to play at places like Florida or Georgia or Alabama or Louisiana State, or go to Tennessee or even Vanderbilt, or even go out there to Texas or Oklahoma, Texas A&M, Arkansas, Kentucky. There's no real reason for you to play at South Carolina. If they're going to try to gerrymander the voices of Black voters so that they don't have any representation of their choosing, don't go play at their schools. Don't go play at the Florida States. Don't go play at the Dukes. Don't go play at Virginia. Don't go play at anywhere. Now, I know that some people might say, well, Virginia, they have a Democratic governor or whatever. The point that I'm making is this, is that you can just say, you know what, I'm going to go play out in California. I'm not even dealing with this. I'll go play at USC. I'll go play at UCLA. I'll go play at Washington or Oregon State. I'll go play at a place like Rutgers. I'll go to New Jersey if I want to do that. I can even go play up at Penn State. Heck, I can go play at Michigan or Michigan State. I don't have to play here. I can go play in Colorado. I can find a blue state, a true blue state that's going to be a place where it's going to be more comfortable for me. I can go play there. I don't have to play at Georgia to make it to the league. I don't have to play at Georgia to be able to get an NIL deal. I don't have to play at Florida. Yes, I will say my own alma mater. Don't have to play in Gainesville. I can go play out in Los Angeles and still make money, still be able to be on television, play in the Big Ten, make big money, be on TV, win national championships. Heck, Indiana just won the national title this year. Indiana for the first time in school history, which just goes to show that you can still win championships, you can still make money, and just like Fernando Mendoza was drafted in the NFL in the first round, right? You can still get drafted. We think about these things and we see what happens, and what that's going to do is apply pressure not only to the university but to those boosters and to other lawmakers in these southern states to say, you know what, we might want to reconsider what we're doing, because given that more than half of the black population lives in the South and more than half of the people, and I have this here, that play in the SEC, for example, according to some reports, where black student athletes make up a significant majority of SEC conference revenue sports rosters. You're talking about more than 56% when you're looking at the combined football and men's basketball players. That's a lot. You have leverage. You don't have to play at these schools. And not only that, because you got to think about this, ESPN signed a 10-year deal that went into effect in 2024 with the SEC in particular. It was a 10-year, $3 billion deal. Now, that $3 billion, when you break it down each year, you're looking at $300 million going to the conference, which is then split equally among the 16 institutions in the conference. Well, all of those schools want their money. But you know what's going to happen? If you have bad teams and bad football on television, ESPN's not going to be very interested in having a bad contract in the long term. So they may honor the contract that they have that ends after the 2033-34 season, but if the SEC is looking at trying to get a bigger contract after that or before that time frame, you're going to have to put a better product on the field. And we're already seeing in the last 3 years, using the SEC as an example, who hasn't won the national championship. The Big Ten has won a national championship in football the last 3 years consecutively. The SEC already may be feeling like they're falling behind. And if you start losing some 5-star recruits to other places in the Big Ten in particular, they're going to fall even further behind, and they're not going to like that. So that's one example that we can use in our toolbox to say, you know what, where can we apply pressure? And if you want to do something about social change in the United States in particular, you're going to have to make sure that you're applying economic pressure. And what I love the phrase of redistributing the pain. I love hearing that phrase, because when you redistribute the pain, it gets everyone to pay attention. Yes, we need to march and we need to be vocal and we need to do things like this where we have platforms to share what we should do and the strategies that we should use moving forward. But I'm so glad that the NAACP has come out and with this out of bounds campaign to say, listen, don't send your kids to these schools in the South. Send them somewhere else where they can continue to play and they can pursue their athletic dreams of being professional athletes and all those things. They can still get a great education, but they just won't be playing in the South. So all of the talent in the South, and a lot of people know that if you want to get good football players, you need to go to places like Texas and Florida and Georgia. And the reality is this: if those players start going somewhere else and they start playing in some of these other schools, Colorado, they start playing in Arizona State, they start playing in California in particular, well, guess what? That means that those players aren't going to be here in the South region of the country, and the SEC in particular, and you're not going to be winning any championships anytime soon. I can tell you that much right now, because these schools rely on that talent. They rely on that talent. They need that talent. But the thing about being in collegiate athletics is that the talent gets to choose where they want to play, because recruiting is everything. And if these athletes just say, you know what, the 5-stars, it doesn't take everyone. I guarantee you that if 10 to 15 of these 5-star recruits just say, you know what, I'm going to play somewhere else because I don't like what I'm seeing in these states where all of these things are happening, where they're trying to rip away black voting power, I'm going to go play somewhere in California. Just by doing that, that will send shockwaves through the athletic departments, university presidents, boosters, and that is one strategy that we have to really rely on, which is using our economic power. our purchasing power to say, you know what, enough is enough. So for every action, there has to be an equal and opposite reaction. And our reaction should always be strategically, how do we spend our money? How do we leverage our resources, whether it be our bodies or our intellect, our talent? How do we use it in a way to say, you know what, I'm not going to invest in what you got going on. I'll go somewhere else. I'll take my talent somewhere else. I'll take my money somewhere else. And then they will start to pay attention. So how do we redistribute the pain? How do we apply economic pressure? That's what we're going to have to talk about. That's what's needed in this moment. And I'm so glad that the NAACP has put out this message for this boycott so that we can start bringing attention to these issues that are happening in real time before the midterms. So continue to think about that. Go back and look at what the NAACP is doing. I think that we're going to need to talk about this more as we approach the fall. And we can talk about that after the season as well, when we start thinking about the transfer portal. So for all those kids who maybe they're like already locked in for this fall to play wherever they're playing at, but they do have the option to go into the transfer portal and they can go play somewhere else come this time next year. So look at that, and we will be back next time, and we're going to talk more about what is the strategy for us moving forward.